I'm going to get into sort of the story, partly from a first-person point of view, leading up to Apple and some of our early developments. You go back to school, and I come from a place called Silicon Valley, California. And there's a lot of electronics and a lot of engineering around there. It's the place where the first integrated circuits were outside of TI were done. The companies started in our area. That's why it's called Silicon Valley. And you find there are a lot of kids who have parents who are engineers. That means there's a lot of electronics kids around. If your interest happens to be electronics because your father had a few batteries and resistors and light bulbs, it's easy to find people who have a common interest or that you can impress it on. And we would form little groups, little tech kid groups in our neighborhood. And as odd as I think about it, I don't think I ever had one friend who was not one of the tech kids. Maybe every kid really wants to do it a little bit. What does it mean? It means, buying all the latest walkie-talkies and strapping wires on people's fences without knowing that you're supposed to ask permission because you're trespassing. But running house-to-house intercoms that way, and doing little pranks, making noisemakers, and reading popular electronics. Early in school, there's a good chance, especially in the Silicon Valley area, that you'll get directed towards electronics projects for science fairs. Your teachers will direct you, your parents will direct you. So a lot of kids come up with electronics in them. Not everyone. Probably not more than 10% are the normal. You can look at any school and spot sort of the math scientific types. They get a reputation in their school and they get good feedback from the other kids about how smart they are in math and science, and that's what drives them in their life. I was rather fortunate because I accidentally stumbled across computers. Throughout my life, my father might give me a manual and have no idea I was going to read it and start studying gates and logic and try to come up with my own improvements and build science fair projects like this. By the time I got to pretty much near the end of high school, my electronics teacher, and it was unusual for me to take electronics. If you're an outstanding math student headed for the scientific realm of life and headed for college, electronics back in the 60s tended to be on the shop side of school. It was like auto shop. It was not a college preparatory curriculum. I just happened to have such an interest that I was not only a bright math student, but also a good electronics student. And when you put math and electronics together, you've got the heart of engineering. So anyway, my electronics teacher realized that I had a lot of computer ability and whatnot that went beyond anything he could possibly teach me in school. He knew that as long as I was in class, I was just going to sit around playing pranks on the other students, like wrapping little hair wires around certain circuits so when they plugged in their radio, it would blow up. And he had the perception to see that I needed something outside of the school. My math teacher, was very bright, and he said, why don't you go upstairs from your math class up to the math office and work on a little computer we got up there. But the trouble is, the teachers didn't know what a computer was. There was nothing close to a computer in the school. And so I got up there and it was a little board with some relays and wires and it was not a computer. So I just found out that I'd go up there every Friday and I would just take off and take 3 lunches instead because it was during lunch period. My electronics teacher said something up where I could go down to Sylvania once a week and program on a real computer. And this was an unheard of dream when you got no computers in your high school at all or anywhere near it. They were too expensive back then. So I was starting to learn how to program, and one day I spotted a manual on an engineer's desk, and I got interested in it, so they said I could have it. And I took it home, and it was several hundred pages thick, describing binary arithmetic, logic, gate diagrams, how registers are set up, and how there's an instruction set for a processor. Inside, you'd learn about 50 specific instructions, and each one of them had a code of 1s and 0 bits, and it meant do this to a certain register inside your machine. And the concepts of sequencing and instruction set, putting little instructions together in a hierarchy and building from add and shift instructions, building a multiply. From a number of other types of instructions, building a search algorithm. That concept came about and it was totally independently driven. Didn't have a parent that helped me, didn't have any teachers I could share this with, any other students. Well, I got so interested in these computers, and it was my big hobby in life. You might get interested in crossword puzzles or just any realm of mathematics or studying some aspect of history. My thing in life was going to be computers, despite the fact that I had no idea that I'd ever have some sort of job in that. I didn't even think it was engineering. I thought engineering was radios and TVs. So I was going to study computers all my life and make that my field of expertise. The trouble is, a computer cost as much as a car back then. I mean, not as much as a car. It cost as much as many cars, as much as a house in about the late 60s. So to sit there and say, I'm going to own a computer in my life instead of a house was a very strong statement. I sat down and I started thinking, God, I'd love to design these things because I'm so interested in the mathematics of computers. And I went out and I got books that showed what sort of integrated circuits you could buy, circuits on gates, and I read everything I could about that, and I knew what a computer was, but I had no books that taught you here are some certain procedures to follow to design the computer. Sat down and collegially worked out a bunch of gates, that would just to do a calculator, do a bunch of addition functions because I knew all the logic for it, and then another one that would go around in a loop. It would do an addition and a shift, and it would pop around in a loop 16 times and be counting how many times. Very crude designs. Integrated circuits started getting better and better. Every time I spotted a new integrated circuit that did a little bit more for the function in the same package, I would sit down and redesign the computer a little bit better, over and over and over. And after a couple of dozen computer designs, you're so self-taught. You've been reaching out and trying to get the best perfect computer designs, the ultimate right way, for so long that you become very skilled without any formal education.